Life doesn't prepare you for moments when everything you believed in collapses in an instant. I thought betrayal was something that happened to other people, to couples who had grown apart. But not to us. Not to me and Samantha. We weren't perfect. But who is? Marriage is about choosing each other every day, no matter what. That's what I believed. For Samantha's birthday, I wanted to do something special. I spent weeks finding the perfect gift, a silver necklace with a heart-shaped pendant. Inside, I had engraved 2 words, always yours. It wasn't expensive or flashy, but it was heartfelt. I thought it would remind her of the love we'd built over the years. That day at work felt endless. Meetings and calls blurred together, but the thought of seeing her smile kept me going. By the time I stepped through the front door that evening, I was exhausted but eager. I couldn't wait to surprise her. The house smelled of her signature roasted chicken, filling the air with warmth and familiarity. From the kitchen, I heard laughter, Samantha's voice mixed with our daughter Grace's giggles. Normally, that sound would fill me with joy, but something about it felt different. Her laugh wasn't just happy. It was lighter, almost playful in a way that made my chest tighten. I set my briefcase down quietly and moved closer to the kitchen. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but I couldn't help myself. I stayed just out of sight as their voices carried down the hallway. "I can't believe how amazing last night was," Samantha said. Her voice was soft, almost dreamy. "He's just so thoughtful, so different." I froze. Who was she talking about? My mind raced as I clung to the edge of the wall, my heart pounding in my ears. She couldn't mean me. I had been working late last night. The name she said next made my blood run cold. "Matt just knows how to make things exciting again," she continued. Grace's reply was curious but innocent. "What do you mean, Mom?" There was a brief pause, and then Samantha laughed. "You wouldn't understand. Let's just say he has a way of making me feel special." The words hit me like a hammer to the chest. I backed away from the hallway, my hands trembling. My thoughts spun out of control as I tried to process what I'd just heard. Who was Matt? A coworker? A friend? Or someone else entirely? The knot in my stomach tightened as I moved into the living room, my legs barely able to carry me. The necklace in my pocket felt heavy now, like a cruel joke. All the excitement I'd felt earlier was gone, replaced by a gnawing sense of betrayal. I sat on the couch, staring blankly at the wall, trying to make sense of it all. Samantha's laughter echoed from the kitchen, but now it felt like a knife twisting in my heart. That night, I didn't say anything. Samantha kissed me on the cheek before bed, and Grace hugged me goodnight like nothing was wrong. I forced a smile, pretending everything was fine. But as I lay in bed beside Samantha, staring at the ceiling, I knew my life had just taken a turn I couldn't ignore. The next morning, I woke up feeling like a stranger in my own home. Samantha hummed in the kitchen as she prepared breakfast, her voice light and carefree, as if nothing had changed. Grace sat at the table, chatting about her plans for the day, her youthful innocence shielding her from the tension I carried. I barely touched my coffee, my appetite lost in the churning storm of thoughts. Samantha's words from the previous night echoed in my mind. Who was Matt? How long had this been going on? Was Grace involved, or was she simply caught in the middle? "Everything okay?" Samantha asked, her eyes meeting mine across the table. Her tone was casual, almost dismissive, as if she hadn't noticed the change in me. "Yeah," I lied, forcing a smile. "Just tired. Long day ahead." Her gaze lingered for a moment before she nodded and turned back to her coffee. I studied her carefully, looking for cracks in her facade, for anything that might give her away. But she was a master of normalcy. If guilt weighed on her, she hid it well. I knew I couldn't confront her yet. I needed proof, something solid that couldn't be denied or twisted. The thought of confronting her without it terrified me. What if she lied? What if she turned it around on me? I wasn't ready for that battle. Over the next few days, I began to watch her more closely. Every interaction, every word, every glance she exchanged with Grace was scrutinized. It felt wrong to spy on my own wife, but I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the story than I'd overheard. One evening, as Samantha was in the shower, I found myself standing in front of her phone. It was lying on the counter, its screen dark and innocent. My hands trembled as I picked it up. I hesitated, torn between my need for answers and my fear of what I might find. I unlocked it easily. Her password hadn't changed in years. My heart raced as I opened her messages. There was right at the top of the list, Matt. His name stared back at me, taunting me, daring me to look further. I opened the thread and began to read. The messages were casual at first, filled with inside jokes and harmless banter. But as I scrolled further, they became something else entirely. Matt, last night was amazing. I can't stop thinking about you. Samantha, me too. I wish we had more time. My stomach churned as I read the words. Each message felt like a dagger, twisting deeper into my chest. I took screenshots, saving them as evidence. This wasn't just a misunderstanding. This was real. The following evening, I sat in the living room, the screenshots burning a hole in my phone. Samantha was in the kitchen, humming as she cleaned up after dinner. Grace had gone to her room to work on her homework, leaving the house eerily quiet. Samantha, I called out, my voice steady but cold. We need to talk. She froze for a moment before turning to face me. What's wrong? She asked, wiping her hands on a dish towel. Her smile was cautious, like she could sense the shift in the air. I held up my phone, the messages displayed on the screen. Who's Matt? Her face paled, and she took a step back. Tom, I can explain. Don't, I interrupted, my voice sharp. I've read the messages. I've seen everything. Don't insult me by lying. Her eyes filled with tears, and she looked away, unable to meet my gaze. It's not what you think, she whispered. Then tell me what it is, I demanded. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you've been seeing someone else behind my back. She hesitated, her hands trembling as she clutched the dish towel. I never meant for it to happen, she said finally, her voice barely audible. It just happened. Her words felt like a slap in the face. It just happened? I repeated, my anger boiling over. You don't accidentally fall into an affair, Samantha. You made a choice. You betrayed me. She broke down then, sinking into a chair as sobs racked her body. I watched her, my heart a mess of anger, pain, and disbelief. The woman I had loved, trusted, and built a life with had become a stranger before my eyes. In the days that followed, the house felt like a war zone. Samantha and I barely spoke, the tension between us thick enough to suffocate. Grace noticed the change, her once bright demeanor clouded with worry. One evening, I found her sitting on her bed, staring at her hands. She looked up when I knocked on the door, her eyes filled with uncertainty. Dad, she said hesitantly, is something wrong? I sat down beside her, my heart heavy. Grace, I need to ask you something, I began, my voice gentle. Do you know Matt? Has Mom mentioned him to you? Her face paled, and she looked away. I didn't think you knew, she whispered. The weight of her words hit me like a freight train. You knew? I asked, my voice cracking. Grace, why didn't you tell me? I didn't know what to do, she said, tears streaming down her face. Mom said he made her happy. She said you wouldn't understand. Her words cut deeper than I thought possible. My daughter, the one person I thought I could count on, had known all along. I pulled her into a hug, her sobs shaking both of us. It's not your fault, I told her. You shouldn't have been put in this position. I'm so sorry. After my conversation with Grace, the weight of the situation became unbearable. I had always believed that I could protect her from the worst parts of life, that I could shield her from the pain of betrayal. But now, I realized that Samantha had dragged her into this mess, forcing her to carry a secret no child should ever have to bear. The days that followed were filled with an uneasy silence. Samantha and I barely spoke, and when we did, it was curt and strained. Grace tried to keep the peace, but I could see the toll it was taking on her. She avoided being in the same room with both of us, retreating to her bedroom whenever the tension became too much. One evening, I decided it was time to take the next step. Samantha was in the kitchen, scrolling through her phone as if nothing had happened. I walked in and placed a manila envelope on the counter in front of her. She looked up, confusion flickering across her face. What's this? She asked. Proof, I said simply. Proof of what you've done. Proof that I'm not blind or stupid. She opened the envelope, her hands shaking. Inside were the screenshots of her messages with Matt, along with the timeline I had pieced together of her late-night outings and secretive behavior. She flipped through the pages, her face growing paler with each one. "Tom," she began, her voice trembling, "I don't know what to say." "Don't say anything," I interrupted. "There's nothing you can say that will fix this. I just wanted you to see the damage you've caused." She sat down heavily, tears streaming down her face. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. But then I remembered the pain she had caused, the trust she had shattered, and the anger came rushing back. "I'm filing for divorce," I said, my voice firm. "I've already spoken to a lawyer. I'll do whatever it takes to make sure Grace comes out of this as unscathed as possible." Samantha looked up at me, her eyes wide with shock. "Tom, please don't do this. We can work through this. I made a mistake, but I still love you." Her words felt hollow, like an echo in an empty room. "You don't destroy someone you love," I said quietly. "You don't lie to them, betray them, and drag your own child into your mess." I turned and walked out of the kitchen, leaving her sitting there with her tears and her regrets. For the first time in weeks, I felt a small sense of relief. I had taken the first step toward reclaiming my life, and I wasn't going to look back. Later that night, I knocked on Grace's door. She looked up from her desk, her face tired and drawn. "Dad," she said softly. "What's going on?" I sat down on her bed, taking a deep breath before answering. "Grace, I want you to know that none of this is your fault. What's happening between your mom and me, it's because of choices we made as adults. You didn't do anything wrong." Her eyes filled with tears, and she shook her head. "But I knew, Dad. I knew, and I didn't tell you. I thought I was protecting Mom, but I was just making everything worse." I pulled her into a hug, holding her tightly as she sobbed into my chest. "You're a kid, Grace. You shouldn't have had to carry this. Your mom put you in an impossible position, and that's on her, not you." We stayed like that for a long time, her tears soaking my shirt as I stroked her hair. When she finally pulled back, I wiped her face and gave her a small smile. "We're going to get through this," I said. "You and me. No matter what happens, I'll always be here for you." The next morning, I reached out to Caleb. He had been my best friend for years, the one person I knew I could trust completely. When I told him everything, he listened without interrupting, his expression growing darker with each word. "This Matt guy," he said finally, "he sounds like trouble. If you want, I can help you dig into him. Find out what kind of person he really is." I hesitated for a moment, but then I nodded. "Do it. I need to know everything." Over the next few days, Caleb worked his connections and uncovered more than I could have imagined. Matt wasn't just some random guy Samantha had met. He had a history of getting involved with married women, using them for his own gain, and then disappearing when things got complicated. There were rumors of shady business deals, lawsuits, and even criminal investigations. Armed with this information, I met with my lawyer again. "We're not just going after a divorce," I said. "We're going to make sure Samantha and Matt can't hurt Grace, or anyone else, ever again." When I confronted Samantha with what I had learned about Matt, her reaction was a mix of shock and denial. "You're lying," she said, her voice trembling. "He's not like that." I handed her the file Caleb had compiled. "Read it," I said. "Then tell me if you still believe that." She flipped through the pages, her face growing paler with each one. When she finally looked up, her eyes were filled with tears. "I didn't know," she whispered. "I didn't know who he really was." Her words did little to soften my anger. "You didn't care," I said. "You didn't care about me, about Grace, or about what this would do to us. You let this man into our lives, and now we're paying the price." After Samantha read through the file, she sat silently, her hands trembling as they clutched the stack of papers. Her tears were steady now, but they no longer moved me. I had seen this performance before, the regret, the sorrow, but this time it felt like it was for herself, not for what she had done to us. "What happens now?" she finally asked, her voice barely audible. I leaned back, crossing my arms. "You tell me, Samantha. What do you want? To keep pretending everything is fine? To ignore what this has done to Grace? Or do you want to face the consequences?" She looked up at me, her face streaked with tears, but she didn't answer. Her silence spoke volumes, and I felt my resolve harden. I had already started the process of moving forward, but now I realized I couldn't just focus on my own recovery. I had to protect Grace from the fallout. I've spoken to a lawyer, I said, my voice steady. The divorce papers will be ready soon. I'll make sure Grace is taken care of, and that she's shielded from this as much as possible. But Samantha, you've made your choices. Now it's time to live with them. Grace deserved the truth, even if it was painful. I couldn't let her grow up with unanswered questions or the feeling that she had been left in the dark. A few days after confronting Samantha, I sat Grace down in the living room. The weight of what I was about to say felt unbearable, but it had to be done. Grace, I began, my voice soft but firm, there's something I need to talk to you about. It's about your mom and me. Her eyes widened, and she hugged a pillow tightly to her chest. Are you getting a divorce? She asked, her voice trembling. I nodded, the lump in my throat making it hard to speak. Yes, sweetheart, we are. Your mom and I have been struggling for a while now, and it's clear that we can't fix things. But I need you to know that this is not your fault. None of this is because of you. Tears filled her eyes, and she looked away. I heard you fighting, she admitted quietly. I knew something was wrong. I reached out, placing a hand on her shoulder. I know this is hard to understand, but we both love you so much. That will never change. Your mom and we've made mistakes, and we need to move on in a way that's best for all of us. She nodded slowly, her tears spilling over as she leaned into me. I just want us to be happy again, she whispered. Samantha tried to reach out multiple times in the days that followed. She left notes on the kitchen counter, sent long text messages, and even sat outside my office door late one night, begging me to talk. But I couldn't. Every word she said felt like a wound reopening, a reminder of how much she had broken. One evening, she cornered me in the living room. Grace was at a friend's house, and the house was quiet except for the sound of rain tapping against the windows. Tom, please, she said, her voice trembling. Can we try? Can we go to counseling? Do something to fix this? I turned to face her, my expression hard. Fix this? Samantha, you didn't just hurt me. You hurt Grace. You destroyed the foundation of our family. This isn't something we can just patch up with a few therapy sessions. She flinched but didn't look away. I know I messed up, she said. I know I hurt you, but I still love you. Doesn't that count for something? I shook my head. It's too late. Love isn't enough to undo what you've done. You made your choices, Samantha. Now I'm making mine. The divorce process began in earnest, and it was every bit as messy and painful as I had feared. My lawyer, a sharp and no-nonsense woman named Rebecca, guided me through every step. She advised me to stay calm, to avoid getting drawn into Samantha's emotional appeals, and to focus on protecting Grace's well-being. Samantha initially fought the terms, particularly the custody agreement. She insisted that she deserved joint custody, that she wasn't a bad mother despite her mistakes. But Rebecca was prepared. She presented the evidence of Samantha's affair and highlighted how it had affected Grace, making a strong case for why I should have primary custody. In the end, the judge ruled in my favor. Samantha was granted visitation rights, but Grace would stay with me. It was a bittersweet victory. I didn't want to take Grace away from her mother, but I knew it was the best thing for her. As the divorce was finalized, Samantha's life began to unravel. Matt's shady business dealings came to light, and he disappeared as quickly as he had entered her life. Her friends distanced themselves, and her reputation in the community was tarnished. She tried to pick up the pieces, but it was clear she was struggling. Meanwhile, Grace and I began to rebuild. It wasn't easy. There were days when the weight of everything threatened to crush me, but I held on for her. I made sure she knew she was loved, that she was safe, and that we would get through this together. Months passed, and the pain began to fade, replaced by a sense of hope. Grace started smiling more, her laughter returning to the house. I threw myself into my work, my hobbies, and my role as her father. Slowly, I began to see a future that wasn't defined by betrayal but by resilience. One evening, as Grace and I sat on the porch watching the sunset, she turned to me and said, "I'm glad we're okay now, Dad. I'm glad we're happy." I smiled, pulling her close. "Me too, sweetheart. Me too." And for the first time in what felt like forever, I believed it.